Wealthy father fired his black nanny, but secretly following her home left him shocked. The wealthy father thought he had seen it all. Money bought him comfort, power, and control. Or so he believed. But the day he dismissed his black nanny, coldly and without a second thought, something gnawed at him. Curiosity, or was it guilt, pushed him to secretly follow her home. What he uncovered along that quiet trail shattered his perception of her, of himself, and of the very life he thought he understood. This wasn't just about a nanny. It was about hidden strength, sacrifice, and truths buried beneath layers of wealth and prejudice. Before we continue this story, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and like this video, so we can bring you even more amazing stories like this one. In the pristine neighborhood of towering gates and marble driveways, Victor Langford lived as though the world revolved around him. A wealthy entrepreneur with more money than most could dream of, he carried himself with the kind of entitlement that left no room for doubt. His mansion was spotless, his cars gleamed like jewels, and even the children's toys were lined in symmetrical perfection. To maintain this flawless existence, he employed staff, gardeners, housekeepers, drivers, and of course, a nanny. Her name was Angela, a black woman in her mid-30s, soft-spoken yet commanding in presence. She had worked for the Langfords for nearly 3 years. She cared for the children as though they were her own, often going above and beyond her duty. But to Victor, Angela was merely a cog in the wheel of his success, a helper, replaceable at any time. The decision to fire her came swiftly, triggered by something as small as a misplaced backpack and a spilled glass of juice. To Victor, it was negligence. To anyone else, it was life. But he didn't see humanity. He saw mistakes. And so, with a cold stare and a dismissive wave, he let her go. Yet as she walked out of his mansion for the last time, something about her steady, unbroken posture unsettled him. She didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't even look back. She simply left, with quiet dignity, her head held high. Victor couldn't shake it. That night, he climbed into his car and decided to follow her home. The black sedan trailed a few cars behind as Angela's modest vehicle weaved its way out of the affluent district and into the city's overlooked corners. Victor lowered his tinted window slightly, as though glimpsing her world required clearer vision. The streets grew narrower, the sidewalks cracked. Neon signs flickered over small stores, and children played barefoot under dim streetlights. It was a far cry from the manicured lawns and grand entrances he was used to. Yet Angela navigated these streets with a quiet familiarity, pulling into the driveway of a small, weathered duplex. Victor parked discreetly across the street. He expected perhaps a lonely apartment or maybe a family waiting to console her. But what he saw next stopped him cold. Angela stepped out carrying groceries, bags he hadn't noticed before. From the house came a rush of small footsteps. Children, 4 of them, ran toward her. Their clothes were worn, their hair uncombed, but their eyes lit up at her arrival. They clung to her, laughing, reaching for the bags, asking questions all at once. Angela didn't look weary, though she had worked all day. She looked alive. Her voice, though faint from the distance, carried a warmth Victor had never heard directed at his own children. Inside the home, through a partially open curtain, Victor saw more. Angela set food on the table, helping the children wash their hands. She portioned the meal carefully, ensuring everyone had enough. When one plate was lighter than the others, she quietly slid hers aside, taking less for herself so the children could eat more. And then came another surprise. An elderly woman emerged from the back room, moving slowly with a cane. Angela assisted her tenderly, guiding her to the table. Victor realized the truth. Angela wasn't just a nanny. She was a mother, a provider, and a caretaker all at once. The weight of her responsibilities pressed against Victor's chest. Here he was, a man who thought her careless for a backpack and spilled juice, while she carried the weight of entire lives on her shoulders with unwavering grace. But what struck him most wasn't just her struggle, it was her strength. Angela sang softly to the children as they ate. her voice a lullaby against the backdrop of a neighborhood filled with noise. She encouraged them, told stories, and even helped one with homework after the meal. There was no resentment in her tone, no bitterness, only resilience. Victor sat frozen in his car. He had fired her without warning, stripping her of a paycheck that likely kept this fragile world afloat. And yet, she carried herself with dignity, refusing to let hardship define her. The man who thought himself powerful suddenly felt small. It hit him like a tidal wave. Angela wasn't simply an employee. She was a lifeline. And in firing her, he had nearly snapped the fragile thread holding her family together. Victor's hands trembled on the steering wheel. For the first time in years, guilt clawed at his insides. He thought of his children, how easily they cried over the smallest inconveniences, how quickly they demanded more, how they never knew what it meant to go without. He had built his empire to protect them from struggle, but in doing so, he had blinded himself to the humanity of those around him. Across the street, Angela gathered her children for bedtime. She knelt by the smallest one, whispering words of comfort until his eyes fluttered shut. She checked on the elderly woman once more, adjusting her blanket. And then, finally, she sat alone at the kitchen table. In that quiet moment, Victor saw her shoulders sag, not in defeat, but in exhaustion, the kind only carried by someone who bore the weight of many lives. Victor could not look away. The image seared into his mind. A woman who gave everything, and a man who gave nothing but orders. It was at that moment that the facade of his wealth cracked. All the luxury in his mansion, all the glittering success, meant nothing compared to the raw courage of a woman he had dismissed as replaceable. He realized he wasn't witnessing weakness. He was witnessing greatness. And for the first time in his life, Victor felt ashamed. Victor drove home in silence that night, his thoughts heavier than the car he steered. His mansion, once a source of pride, now felt hollow. The marble floors echoed too loudly, the chandeliers seemed gaudy, and his children's laughter rang differently in his ears. The next morning, he made calls, not to his business partners, but to his own conscience. He reinstated Angela, not as a nanny, but as a family advocate, with better pay and benefits that would secure her children's future. But beyond money, he offered respect, the kind he had withheld for far too long. Angela accepted, not with gratitude, but with quiet grace. She didn't owe him thanks. He owed her recognition. And in her presence, Victor found himself changing. His children began to see her not as the nanny, but as a guide, a mentor. Even Victor's hardened exterior began to soften, his sharp words replaced by reflection. But the true transformation lay within his heart. He realized racism wasn't always loud or violent. It often hid in entitlement, in the silent belief that others existed only to serve. He had lived blind to it, until one night's drive forced him to see. Victor never told Angela he had followed her home. That secret stayed locked in his chest. But every time he watched her walk through his door, head high, shoulders squared, he remembered the sight of her feeding her children, singing them to sleep, carrying a world he could never comprehend. And so the story of a wealthy father and his black nanny was no longer one of power and dismissal. It became one of revelation. Because sometimes it takes losing someone to realize their worth, and sometimes it takes following them home to finally see who they truly are.